Hello, welcome to the G.I. Joe New News Review. I am David Allen. The following content was originally intended for the G.I. Joe fan club, but due to unforeseen circumstances, this content will no longer be used in that venue. And so I wanted to share them with you here. I hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome to another episode of the G.I. Joe Fan Club Live. I am David Allen, your host. I am joined by my co-host, Dan Klingenstrom Jr., author of the Creating the History of G.I. Joe series of books, and Philip Donnelly, co-host of Articulated Points with Patrick Stewart. Welcome, both of you guys. I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. So this series is about the history of G.I. Joe. Every episode we showcase a different facet of the G.I. Joe brand from its inception to current. And we are in the 60th anniversary of G.I. Joe. And I thought what's the best topic to talk about is the merchandising of G.I. Joe, because G.I. Joe has had one of the best merchandising campaigns of any toy line in history, up there maybe with Star Wars, Masters of the Universe, but those three are probably maybe a little Transformers, but there's nobody else that has a better merchandising campaign in its history than G.I. Joe, all the eras from 60s till now. So I'm going to showcase some items from the history of the G.I. Joe merchandising that they've done over the years from all eras. I'm going to start with some games. G.I. Joe is always about kids, so they geared it towards children. So there's a lot of this stuff is geared toward kids. So I'm going to start with games. First off, there was the Live the Adventure game. Then there was the Adventure board game. Some of these are out of order, so they're not in the chronological order. So in case someone's saying that I'm doing it out of order, I'm just doing it as far as I can get it in my hands because it's all around me. G.I. Joe Monopoly.
2008.
Yeah. Commando Attack.
That's a favorite of mine.
I think that is probably the best board game they put out because it really is kind of like a 3D map you can put your figures on.
Exactly.
And then they did an update of Commando Attack for the 2000s.
Yeah, that was not so great. I have the history from that, but you know, it's all right.
And because they were also gearing a lot of this stuff towards children, a lot of it's family oriented, like this is a family game here. A lot
So
of
the
it
makers
was,
of Uno.
a lot of it
We
was
play that every weekend.
You did?
No, right now.
Not well, yeah. So a lot of this stuff is geared toward children, but there was also reading materials, music, and here's a couple of samplings of some records that they made in the past. And then some of these books on record, if I can get them up. Books on record. I don't know if you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also got into a variety of different books over the years for children. This is from the 2000s. This is from the 80s.
Like great Earl
this-
Norem art.
Yep.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah, beautiful art.
That one's from the 90s, I would guess. Who the hell is-
That's actually IDW era.
Oh, that was you're right. That was IDW. You're right. Then here's some coloring books from the 80s. You can see that. And
I gotta think that's Jack Kirby art on the cover of that one.
it is very Jack Kirby-ish. And then there was,
Hoy hoy.
hey, welcome.
How's it going?
Our second co-host, James Kavanaugh Jr. has joined us. He's the author of the Rank and File resource book and the the fact, I can't think of the other one, and I have it right in front of
RHC guidebook.
the RAC guy in the Rank and File series of guidebooks. Sorry, James. Thank you for
You're
joining
fine.
us. We're talking about merchandising. Then there was the cereal that came out that had the comics. And along with the cereal, they had a lot of other weird food gimmick toys as well. They did this, it was like a canteen that had food in it. Then they had these little, like, they were like nerds, but they were little canteen nerd things. And along with that, because it was food, we had to have lunch boxes, different series of lunch boxes that came out over the years, different styles of lunch boxes. We had the G.I. Joe collector magazine that came out for the kids, that geared towards kids. And looking through these, this is an interesting thing because there was like ads for music and ads for all kinds of weird stuff in there. And then a couple other odd toys that were geared towards children. Sticker books, Shrinky Dinks. We also had, because we wanted to help the literacy, G.I. Joe kids learn to read, they had little novels.
Do your venture.
And that was from the new movie. I won't even mention that movie, but I showed the novel anyways. This is the new novel by Kelly Scovran, and it's excellent, by the way. So what else? We also, because we'd like to showcase the kids playing as G.I. Joe, the activity of it. We had costumes, we have socks, and I'm sure there were pajamas and all kinds of other stuff and things when I was a kid that I remember having, but I don't have them anymore. We also had other activities that the kids could do that were related to G.I. Joe, like puzzles, doing puzzles. And I have a bunch of other puzzles, but they're not in boxes. They're separated. So I didn't want to showcase them. And then, because we want the kids to feel like they are living the adventure, we had cups and glasses for G.I. Joe for the kids. And then other activities that you could do as a child. These are actually modern, but you could still do G.I. Joe because they were kind of like models back in the day. But these are new models from recent years.
Nice.
Careful of simply the ankles on those figures.
Yeah, I remember your video on that. But they could also do things like outdoors play as well. Besides, because G.I. Joe, I played with my toys outside. So there was like activities like this, the remote control RC car, and then the Jada Mark II car from last year that came out, all RC related.
Nice. Yeah.
They had, if you were into more outdoors play, you could get a kite set, different kite sets from G.I. Joe that came out back in the day that were fun for outdoors. And you could also pretend to be a G.I. Joe and have this cool walkie-talkie game thing. I'm not even sure how to use it because my batteries died in it, but I do have it.
I had
then,
that.
you know, when the kids had to go to bed and they had to go take a shower, you could get shampoo and some conditioner to take care of your business in the shower, in the bathroom for the kids. So they really were thinking of everything. And on top of that, they were thinking of like Christmas time as well. So you can get a Christmas order, a new Christmas order or an old Christmas order from G.I. Joe from back in the day as well. Plus, because it's G.I. Joe, you had to have something to keep your G.I. Joes contained and safe when you went to school. So they had these cool collector cases from over the decades that you could buy, that you could get for your GI Joes, and then oops, I forgot one of my other lunch boxes earlier. That lunch box. Oh well. And then if you wanted to really go to town, you could decorate your room, and you could use wall decals to decorate your room with GI Joe and stuff like that. Which I have my walls decorated now, so I must be like a big kid. And then one of my favorite things is GI Joe miniatures. And so they've done all these different types of miniatures over the last 60 years, different style of Jada miniatures and different things like that. So this is just a sampling. Oh, I forgot. If you wanted to get really into gaming, you could do role-playing games and get involved that way. That was a big thing in the 80s. When I was young, I didn't really do a lot of that stuff because I was outdoors playing with my GI Joes. And then, sorry, if you're an expert GI Joe collector and you want to know about GI Joe itself, the toys, you can get into reference guides. So you can get these two wonderful reference guides from one of our hosts, and you can get these two reference guides from another one of our hosts, and then you can
That's the
get
good stuff.
you
I
can
feel like I need to make a
this
reference
guide.
guide now.
You get this guy that talks about the toys as well.
One of these
Because
Invent
you
in that
like
one at
those
least.
toys. Then you can get reference guides about the cartoons. You can get reference guides about the art, because the art is absolutely beautiful. And this reference guide is really nice, by the way. All those other ones are nice too. So don't get upset at me if I say the wrong thing. And this cool reference guide. And then if you're in England and you want to talk about the British GI Joe, you can get these reference guides. So there you go. So I think I've covered. Oh no, I forgot one more thing. One more thing. Sorry, my presentation. You can get other little like tchotchke, like collector type stuff, like Lego type stuff. They make these ones and these ones, and then there are some unique, little unique toys that are out there. If you're really deep into GI Joe, like some weirdos on this video, you can get these type of things. So there you go. So I hope that gives a variety of merchandising that GI Joe has. And do you guys have any that you would like to share? Oh, I forgot one more thing. Because I'm wearing this cool GI Joe jacket, apparel is a big thing. GI Joe apparel as well. And then there's that thing behind me if you wanted to go see it on the big screen, or maybe see an animated feature film or something like that as well. Sometimes they put those out.
You were
We don't
bringing
talk
it.
about those.
Oh, well.
So,
It's good.
do you guys have any merchandise? What do you think about, first, what do you guys think about GI Joe merchandise over the decades? We're in the 60th anniversary. They have had the best merchandising campaigns that I can imagine, or I wouldn't have bought all this crap.
Well, I can imagine there's at least one dominant merchandising thing we aren't thinking of, and that's because we're thinking of boys' toys. But Barbie is out there. The
Totally
juggernaut of
forgot about
merchandising.
the girls.
Now that's
Right,
true.
Barbie. Yep. And
Don't want to
probably
get in her way.
Barbie goes for the jugular.
Yeah, those boots are
we
on.
got an entire aisle full of crap. God, we barely get one or two, three, maybe. This year, the last 2 years have been really big on GI Joe merchandise, and I don't have everything that they've shown because they have some really cool high-end figures, statues, some merchandise like letter openers that are really nice, swords, helmets. This year and last year, they really hit the merchandising button and have gone all out. Everybody, I've shown a handful of things, but there's so much more that I haven't even shown. But this is just a sample of what has come out over the decades.
So
Okay,
I have a question.
go ahead.
So do you guys consider the accessories that came to the figures back in the 60s? You know, the accessory packs with the guns and the boots and all that. Do you consider that merchandise, or do you consider that part of the figure?
I consider it part of the figure line because it is part of the GI Joe toy line.
On the other hand, the vehicles were produced by a different company under license, so maybe the tanks and the jeeps could be
I did not
considered
know that.
merchandise.
Interesting. I think it's
If I was
interesting
doing-
how
Go ahead, Dan. Or did you go silent or?
no, I was going to say, I think it's interesting to see the waves of the merchandise that happens. Because I remember when they, redid G.I. Joe in 2000, 2001, all the G.I. Joe versus Cobra and the Spy Troops and all that stuff. There's all kinds of that stuff. I was buying everything at that point.
Oh, wow.
The figures with the figures with the gum and
Yep.
and
Merchandise was huge back then.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see the waves that they gone through. But I mean, Phil, you probably know more than that or more than me, but I don't know about 25th anniversary and James, you probably know too. With 25th anniversary and even Retaliation and Rise of Cobra, I don't think there was as much during that time, correct? I mean, maybe
Rise
Cobra,
of
there was.
Cobra opened floodgates
There
on
was.
merchandising, but 25th anniversary was really slow because they didn't
Okay.
expect it to be a retail juggernaut because the idea was just the 2 5-packs to put out there, mark vacation, and move on. So
Yeah.
they really didn't have anything in the pipeline until Rise of Cobra came out, and then you got stuff like that G.I. Joe Monopoly, which is probably more 25th than anything else. And there was a deck of cards you could get from Comic-Con. But other than that, there was Rise of Cobra everything from like
I remember
bicycles
that,
to
yeah.
cologne.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
it's-
true.
There was the novel.
And the
There was
toilet.
party supplies. There was a
Eau de
lot of
toilette,
stuff.
yeah.
And then there's
What about the
was there Retaliation a lot? There wasn't a lot of Retaliation stuff though, right?
No,
And
they
then
really
They
pulled
just
back. on
stuck
that.
with the toy
Yeah.
line mainly with that.
They did some
movies.
because it was a movie, but yeah, not nearly. Rise of Cobra was supposed to piggyback off, and I think Phil, you may be able, in particular, be able to correct me if I'm wrong. But Transformers was such a mind blower. I mean, it just surpassed all expectations to the
The
point where
first
toys were
Transformers movie was
way
really,
behind.
really performative. Like Hasbro was sold out of toys for a while. I don't know if people remember that, but they couldn't meet demand on the action figures, and that's like the main thing of Transformers.
You know?
So when Revenge of the Fallen was coming out, they were planning big, and Hasbro saw dollar signs. So did Paramount, and this is the same year that Rise of Cobra is coming out, so they're just doing the same thing for them.
Yeah,
And then
So they
both
brought
movies
that-
kind of underwhelm.
And
So-
there wasn't much for Snake Eyes movie, correct? As far as
There
mark-
was a little, like I said, they did the novel. The novel came out a little late. There was comic book stuff, toy stuff. There was some weird 2 or 3 different toy lines. There was a little bit of Snake Eyes. It was nowhere near the Rise of Cobra, but it was more than the second movie. It was more than that.
Retaliation.
Retaliation, yeah.
Snake
Yeah.
Eyes is hard to point a finger at because of COVID, and then all that,
Yeah.
that shipping, that whole presence, that whole process, all got disrupted. So Snake Eyes stuff kind of came out here,
Yeah.
here, here. I didn't particularly watch
And
it.
then being a terrible movie didn't help. So
Yeah. But according to the box office.
It made its
Yeah.
money. It made its money plus a little profit. I'm not.
that's because there's nothing else playing.
Well, that's
Well, Black Widow was out during the time, I think.
I think she got the month before to herself.
yeah. I think she did all right. And then the only other caveat I would add to answer your 25th question, yeah, during the 25th, no, there wasn't much. But if you were to look at what they've done with the 25th art and all that, they've like retroactively put out 25th style merchandise throughout the last
Sure.
15 years.
True.
But it all goes in
Great.
spurts. It's really, you can tell when Hasbro really wants to take a push on G.I. Joe and when they look backwards on what has sold and what haven't sold and say, let's regroup, let's take a down slope,
Mhm.
and then we'll maybe try again, which they inevitably do try again later on down the line.
Yeah.
It seems to me like every 20 years or so, if you look at the 60 years, like you have the original 12-inch from the 60s, huge push, ads, all kinds of merchandise. You could buy every friggin' thing you wanted for 12-inch at the time for
True.
like 4 years. And then it kind of just went, "Blip." Then the 80s hit, and then A Real American Hero blew it all up again. And 90% of what I'm showing here is Real American Hero stuff. And then it kind of went down a little in the 2000s. And then the like you said earlier, the Joe vs. Cobra, the Vala vs. Venom,
By troops.
another huge
Mhm.
push. And
Well,
then
it's kind of, go ahead, I'm sorry.
it was kind of a roller coaster back and forth for the last 20 years. And last year and this year, maybe the merchandising thought process is a lot different than it had been in the past. Like we're getting a lot more high-end stuff because that new phrase kidults has become coined in the media, that we're the ones buying the stuff, not for our kids necessarily, most of us anyways. So they're gearing it towards up. Like you can buy high-end shoes, high-end watch bands, high-end clothing and stuff like that. That you're not
Extensive
buying that stuff
Enterprises
for kids.
business card holders.
Yeah, business card holders and stuff like that. So I think it's based on the era in which it's geared at. Like if you look at the Real American Hero, that was definitely kids push. They're pushing that towards the kids, the parents that are buying this for the kids. The original 12-inch was a little bit higher age kids. I would say like 15, 14, 16 age, more mature kids, because that's real military. That was real military. And we had
No,
just got,
I think the age. So I'm 45. I was born in 1977. I'm arguably the youngest kid at that age, 5 years old, to jump on the 82 brand. Right, a 4-year-old's not going to necessarily jump on a 3-2-1-6, obviously. So, as I understand it, with the 12-inch, sure, they were playing it with it, and they're 6, 7, 8 years old. Because I mean, think of it in the frame. Sure, it was military, but it was also the frame of reference of what's on the toy aisle and what's the zeitgeist. They were running
Yeah,
around.
you got to
with- they were
remember,
running- Look at
G.I.
all the-
Joe's the first action figure. They
Yeah.
invented
Yeah.
the category. So
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
absolutely aimed at kids too. Look at the commercials.
and they were
They're really-
Yeah.
and all the no, I don't the toy guns they were playing with, firing off stuff that are banned in today's you know, like-
But also they were aiming for World War II era, which
Oh.
was, in the creators' words, the last good war. So they were purposely going around the whole Vietnam question. And when that became too hard to ignore, that's when G.I. Joe pivoted to adventurer.
Mhm.
The only other caveat I would throw out with this whole, I mean, in the larger picture is the whole chicken and the egg. So Hasbro says we're going to make a big push on GI Joe. Like they decide that internally, like classified. I think it's fair to say they're doing an above average push with GI Joe than other series and lines. Then they reach out to these people that see if they want a license. But at the same time, if GI Joe's kicking and doing well, let's say mid 80s Real American Hero, then the licensees are all going to come flocking into them saying, gimme, I want to, please let me put your newest figure on my pillowcase or toilet paper or whatever. And
I think I'd like to point out the merchandising in 1982 was all done by Marvel. And it was
Oh, yeah.
83 when Hasbro decided we're going to take the reins of this. So that's why merchandise for that first year looks very different from the others, because it was Marvel going through their merchandising streams. So you get the coloring books, you get the story books, but they all say things like Marvel books on them. And in fact, that continued a long time for the comics.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But that's why you get like puzzles coming out that looks like it has artwork from Jack Kirby on it, because it's all done in-house, what they can get away with. So when 82 G.I. Joe sales go through the roof, again, it's Hasbro deciding, oh, this is worth us taking the time to invest in and decide for ourselves who is going to be the merchandising.
Do you happen to know what Marvel thought about that when they were removed from the equation, and i.e. removed from the money?
That I do not know, but I would imagine, well, since they kept control of like coloring books and storybooks up
Okay.
until the late 80s, I gotta think they worked out some sort of deal there.
Sure, they probably have bigger fish to fry and other
Yeah,
non.
I mean, they were at the height of Claremont X-Men. They
okay.
G.I.
Yeah,
Joe.
so-
At that point, dropping the bucket. Later on, maybe 85, 86, they would have cared more.
oh, yeah,
yeah,
because it was the number
that's
one
when-
comic at that point, correct?
Well, yeah, they
Yeah.
were selling millions of copies of G.I. Joe in the
Mhm.
85, 86, 87, 88. That was the height of the Marvel comic era at that point. But do you guys have any cool merchandise that you would like to showcase?
Here's something I think you'd enjoy. Let me see if I can switch this around. So this is like you're saying, So GI Joe products are available in 51 different manufacturers, and so then you have all the color forms, High
Wow.
Flyer, Deca, Z Toys, Hewitt soap, and it just keeps going on and on. Slippers, shoelaces. So to your point, just reading down here, just to kind of give an idea, like you were saying, lunch kits, bicycles, model kits, reels and cartridges, vinyl stick-on shrinky dinks, kites, tableware, tumblers, mugs, inflatables, bar and liquid soap, shirt, pants, toy watches, telephone, pajamas, robes, sneakers, juvenile furniture, Halloween costumes, metal waste baskets, hats and caps, jigsaw puzzles, Presto Magics, walkie-talkies, radios, watches, bicycle accessories, roller skates, card board games, knit hats, gloves, mittens, gumball banks and gum, Velcro target game, bicycles, records, cassettes, book sets, slippers, shoelaces, tote and slumber bags, boy swimwear, vinyl sticker, coloring books, metal jewelry, stationery, beach towels, washcloths, pencils and rollers, knit socks, belts, suspenders, school bags, backpacks, gift wrap, gift boxes, blankets, sleepers, ink, character stamps, play sets, and sleeping bags and tents. I mean,
I
it's like
know
a
I had
mouthful.
like all the school stuff, like you
These
have
are-
folders, pencil holders, different styles of pencils, different unique stuff like that for school and everything like that. I had all that stuff. I think I even had that trash barrel and sleeping bag,
Amazing. Nice.
which I still did.
Well, I have
Sure.
here what I think is probably the rarest GI Joe storybook. These don't come up a lot, and the reason they're so rare is that they're all special order.
Oh,
So
wow.
basically, you would go into the mall. Your parents would go up to a kiosk, and I only know how this works because my parents did this for me. Not for a GI Joe book at the time; it was a dinosaur book, but I recognized the signs on what this was when I came across it. Basically, your parents would fill out a form. They'd put in the name of their kid and then maybe the name of 2 or 3 friends or siblings. And then the storybook was pretty much a Mad Libs. They would put your kid's name in as like the kid protagonist and then some of their friends as, people going along for the adventure. So then the story became a personalized book. You can see it's it starts off with a
Nice.
birthday celebration.
Yeah.
And
Who
this one is
illustrated
for a
that, Phil?
Christopher Gallagher
Hmm.
from Nona, Uncle Jeff, Auntie and Nancy around. So every one of these books is unique because they all have different names in the slot. And so it's not even properly bound. It's just this thing on the
Oh,
cover.
wow.
So it may
Yeah.
have come back within a few days to pick up. But so these, I've seen maybe 2 or 3 of these up on listings, but they're definitely not as widely available as the other storybooks that are out there.
Who illustrated
Sure.
that, Phil?
It does not really say. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Illustrated by Richard Marcege. Never mind. It does
Okay,
say.
so I've actually talked to him before, and he was like, yeah, I'm not too proud of those books. So yeah, because I saw that
Yeah,
you
that's
maybe
not the
posted it
greatest
recently.
hawk there.
I'm
I
sure
asked
it's
him, I'm
fun.
like, hey, I just saw something I've never seen before. I don't know who had it, but I shared a couple pictures with him. And he was saying that it wasn't his favorite. So
So that would be merchandise during the Deke era
Nice.
then, which is very rare. You don't see a lot of merchandise during the Deke era. Interesting.
The merchandise is out there. It's just generally not in storybook form anymore. It's more just like drawing kits or like the wrapping paper and stuff, where it's just
or
more,
the color rub things, whatever those were.
yeah, and like bowls and plates, more art centric, where they could just kind of slap a drawing on it and call it a day, rather than actually having to invest in a writer or something.
Gotcha.
Sure.
Yeah, because what are the things called when the plastic plates and you kind of rub the crayon across it and creates the image? What are those called?
Oh, shoot. You put the paper on top of it, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Iron-ons?
What are they?
Iron-on?
Tracing plates, maybe.
Now
Tracing plate. There you go. Yeah, the
it's
tracing
it's got the outline. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's got the outline built in, molded into the plastic. Then you put the paper on it, and then you rub the
Kind of
crayon.
rub it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the,
So, yeah, I think-
or whatever.
I think it was called
Okay.
tracing plates. I have
Yeah, you're not exactly tracing, but I get what you're getting at.
I think that's what they actually called it though. The actual set.
Okay.
Like you can blame Hasbro if it's wrong.
All right, yeah.
Blame those guys back, those 90s guys. Oh yeah, because I remember that because I was fortunate enough to get some of the original sketches for those.
Oh, nice.
For those sets that Bart Sears actually did most of them. So that's something I'd bought way back in, I don't know, what would you call it? Late 2000s, like 2008-ish, 9-ish, 10-ish. So it's pretty fun. There's some fun ones in there. So I was
Real quick, how many of those custom books were there?
I have no idea. As far as I know, it's just the one for G.I. Joe.
Okay.
Because it's probably just a whole range of different properties or original stories they're putting out. And then just you repeat that ad nauseum until it's no longer viable.
Sure. Yeah. Well, then I'd wonder how many tracing plates they did as well going forward at those etching things.
Yeah, I mean, I have the final product. I have a couple of those.
I know what you're talking about, Dan. One of those, it was like a little thing. It had G.I. Joe on it, a character and stuff like that. It had like a grayish thing, and it had a thing you would draw on it, and then you could lift it up and draw again on it, and then do it. Oh yeah, I remember that.
No, I'm describing something totally different.
You can put two characters against each other. If I can find it, I'll try to find the images real quick. But I want to say they're blue green, and then because it's from the 90s, because there's Overkill and Snake Eyes and who else was in that set? I think Hawk was a character, Storm Shadow was a character. But yeah, it's fun, it's neat. I know the rounds part's like a bright neon green, totally 90s Joe. And yeah, so they're fun. They're a fun set. And I think what you did was not like the girls, because my sisters had those for Barbies where you take the different body parts, like the head, and then a different maybe dress, and then different legs. Yeah, so that's for like Barbies. I remember that my sister
Paper dolls.
No, they're the same thing, same concept. The Joe ones, I think it was more versus character. So you could put two characters versus one another, and then do your little trace plate.
And they had word bubbles that were empty, so you could actually fill in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got you.
So,
fun. I'd like to point out, so you had your standard coloring book size, but they also had a little bit larger.
Oh, nice
Comparison. And then they had.
Is that gung ho up there on the mountain?
Ridiculously large.
Oh, geez.
I think I had did they do issue 1 of the comic in that size as a coloring book? I have
Yes,
that.
they did.
Oh, wow.
And this basically is like retelling the first issue, just with worse art.
Oh, amazing.
Sorry.
And then there's also this one. So
yeah, I love those giant ones.
actually,
They're awesome.
Uh-oh.
these two are the same book. It's just the cover that's different.
That's right.
Is that the one that was at AR? Was that AR?
Might not have been. Wasn't my copy. I think
Not yours.
maybe
Okay.
from someone else. I know somebody else who has one of these. Look at the border. Mine has yellow for this. I think other ones have red.
Wow.
But if you're gonna go for
Variations.
go for the Earl Norem art, 'cause it's the
Yeah,
best part about it.
Oh, sure.
And it's the one where you can look up close and be able to see where brush strokes are.
Isn't that crazy? Oh, yeah. At that size, geez, now that you pull it back, pull it away from the. Yeah. All right. Hey.
It is comically large.
Yeah. Hey. Heyo.
Well, because I think kids were more interactive in the 80s than they are today. Definitely, I got out there and I did stuff. I didn't stay in the house like the kids today do. And I think depending upon the era, I think the ad campaigns are geared based off of that, because now what are they trying to do? They're pushing a lot of stuff to adults. They're doing video games, which kids are into video games. So I think it's based on the era of which the kids are around, or the people that are interested in the brand are there, which people and stuff like that. It's interesting.
I mean, they sell adult comic book or adult coloring books. Well,
James, where are you going
I'm
with
not
this?
going there, folks.
James, where are you going with this?
Save that for the after show.
Well, you know, they have those weird books where the Barbies where you take the clothes off and you put different clothes on and stuff, and underneath there's just a woman with a underwear.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Maybe they have that for G.I.
Yeah.
Joe.
We all peeked under our sisters' Barbies, maybe. Just me. Huh? What?
One of the weird things that confused
TMI.
me is this GI Joe sticker kit.
Oh,
Because
wow.
the logo
I
on there
showed you my
is
sticker
12-inch
book.
themed.
I showed you my sticker book earlier.
It's got a
Oh.
copyright of 2000 on it,
Oh,
but that's 92, 93 era art mixed in with 12-inch. It's all over the place.
Wow. Yeah. Look at that.
well, that's the thing, you know, when you have a license for this stuff, you can do whatever the hell you want. You can use Hector Greedo art. They're still using it today.
So there's
Isn't
two
that
different Dukes on here.
See, now it'd be, they had to have had that art held over from the early 90s, right?
Yeah, like here's the Ninja Lightning with Snake Eyes with the, what is that, the Badger?
Yeah.
And then two different gung hos.
Sure. I'd be
But
curious to
then-
know what it was originally for.
World War II Willie's Jeep.
Sergeant Savage.
Is that
Extreme.
Savage or is that 12-inch?
No, that is definitely 12-inch. That is
Okay.
that is an unfortunately drawn gigantic 5-head.
Jeez, yeah. That's a ride. I don't even remember seeing
And
that.
then this
back in
weird modern
2000,
tank
2001. Oh yeah, yeah.
under Ghost Strikers. It it just makes no sense.
And those aren't even drawn, right? Isn't that like a painting of the Ghost Strikers? Is that the box art?
That's not the box art. It's just redrawn. Probably taking like the license image and then coloring it themselves.
Sure. Okay. Fun.
What else you got?
Presto Magic set.
Oh,
Down transfer game. So I'm sure there's some pretty nice art in there, but I am not opening this.
I don't blame you.
So we'll never know.
Oh, come on.
yeah, I didn't open my Shrinky Dinks either, but there's some really classic old artwork in that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My sticker book had some really cool artwork too. I got this, actually, this is something I was hunting for because I wanted a Cobra logo sticker to put on my Cobra Castle. So I got this, and it has all kinds of cool stuff inside. This was already open when I got it, so it doesn't matter if I open it up now. But there's some really beautiful stuff in here. And I just dumped all the stickers. They have all these little sticker things where back in the day, they used to have those story sticker guides. And you could put the stickers in different places. I don't know if you can hear me or not. But we
Oh,
used to
nice.
have
Yeah.
the story, so you'd put the stickers in the
Okay.
different story places, stuff. So that's,
Okay.
that's what
Yeah.
all that is. But I got the Cobra logo in there as well, and they came in these packs.
Yeah. David, you see Philip showing him in his binder.
His cards, yeah, I see that.
Yeah, you got that too. Okay.
You can see
I
some of the
don't have mine in a binder. I have mine like in piles and little
Nice.
card boxes because I have never found those GI Joe binders. I want those binders to put mine in, but like I said, I don't
There
have
is.
them.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
well, there was only the one real trading card binder. I'm sure they made school binders.
That was for
But-
the Impel ones from the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
Which I
It is.
really like those cards. It's a shame that they have a bad rap for some odd reason, but the card market in the 90s was like through the roof.
There it is.
And so,
The
of
thing-
course, G.I. Joe was going to capitalize on the card market. And I like the art in those. I think they're really nice. But
Actually-
it has a bad rap. Maybe they produced too many or something.
Produced too
I don't
many.
know.
Yeah, that's all it is.
So Phil, yours is the same as this one, right?
yeah, but yours is in much better shape than mine. I do like to point out, for being a custom-made binder directly made for this trading card set, it is grossly oversized.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have more in there. I think someone.
We-
Yeah.
I mean, I
Mine's
even
not.
added in the gold borders in the back just to give it a little more bulk, and the checklist that you had to mail in
Ooh.
for. And it's
Don't-
still,
Well, then don't the cards say Series 1 anywhere and everywhere all over them, implying they were going to make these by the millions. I mean,
It does say Series 1, yeah.
10 series.
And see, Dan's got the cards from the 80s, which those are beautiful cards. All the Hector Garrido art and animation art cards and this and that. They're beautiful. I love that set.
What
Oh,
is
yeah.
worth pointing out is if you get out the Wolverine card art card,
Yeah, oh yeah.
the
The
cover
original
girl
hair.
on that is not what's on the actual box.
I was just in there 3 or 4 of them that have pre-production elements to them.
The eels, if you look at the backpack,
Smaller.
It's way
Or
too
is that
big. Yeah.
bigger? I can never remember which one it is.
I think it's
Yeah, I
weird
mean,
that
They
the
mentioned the
Roadblock
Dreadnought.
is thrown off the set because it's Roadblock version 2 with the
Oh.
digital explosion, whereas
Yeah.
everybody else has the realistic explosion.
Wow, where'd you get that? Is that like a limited version that they were giving away somewhere?
Nope, that's
No.
just card number 13.
Unlucky 13.
there he is. Yeah.
Dan, any insight or I think anybody as to why it's got the version 2 art and not the version 1?
I don't know.
Just
I'm
happened
assuming
to be
just
Uh,
availability.
printing
I'm sure.
I'm assuming.
Is it like
Straightforward
timing,
answer is
maybe?
that the card was really the card series came out for 86
Ah, that's
because
why.
there's the sticker packs that came in which were
Yeah.
the same as the tattoos, but there's Serpentor right there.
Ah, yeah.
So it
There's
has to be
86 Hawk.
Yeah, that's right. Hawk and Leatherneck and
Then there was also in between this Milton Bradley action card set and the Impel card set.
Mhm.
There was this comic images set, which nobody really talks about because it's just reusing art from the comics, and it's kind of
Well, I
boring
don't
because
know about that. That's different.
it's not very unique artwork, and some of the characters for like being character cards with like names of the characters on it, you'll get repeating characters.
Is that the guy that did Order of Battle series, the comic series? That's a lot of his artwork.
Herb Trimpe?
Botto,
No, who did the
Joe.
Order of Battle
Joe
miniseries?
Beato.
Joe Beat, yeah.
Yeah.
Del Beato, he was actually the inker.
That's right. As far as I mean, and then the 30th anniversary. So what I always liked
Yeah, that's
was
fun.
they showed all the unproduced stuff. On the 30th.
Do what
Penciling
now?
with Herb Trimpe.
Oh, nice. But I always like the 30th anniversary set, which I don't have in front of me, but I always enjoy like seeing some of the unproduced stuff or like the little snippets on the back, the history.
Oh,
Yeah, especially when when they showed Deep Six with Killer Whale and a little bit of history there, and then you saw like that unproduced art for that woman figure. They showed the Man of War on there, which actually I later found the Man of War doesn't look anything like that concept. So I
This is the
saw
30th
a hard
salute.
copy of it.
Yep.
Yes, the 30 salute. So I mean,
This is also the set that has the most amount of chase cards. And those chroma cards, they go bad after a few years.
I never knew
The
that.
faces on this guy he's looking really pale.
He's
that's a
And-
check.
There's also, this is the hardest card to get, the signed Joe Kubert one, because there's only 500 of them.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And then there's the promo card, which isn't included in the checklist, so you don't know to look for it.
I think I do have that one.
Yeah,
And then
I'll
the
have to check mine.
6-in-1 card, which is like inserted into a case.
Oh,
So,
wow. That'd be
There's a
good.
lot of those to track down if you want the full set.
Let's look and see. Yeah, some of the
But
things.
it is a
let's see.
fun overview of G.I. Joe to that point.
I wonder if
gives
there's
you-
anybody in the world kind of like the Star Wars or Rancho Obi-Wan that has a collection like that, like something of every single thing in G.I. Joe. Is there anybody out there that has that? Oh yeah,
There's a
I
couple
love that. I
guys.
always wanted
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I begged my mother and father for it, and they would not get it for me.
Yeah, the 10. Well,
The
my
10.
kids try to. Yeah, it's taped. I mean, it's sealed from what I can tell from when I got it. Yeah, my kids have tried to, persuade me many years ago to open this thing and give it to them, and I almost did. But the problem was, we bought this other tent thing for him prior, got played for 3 days and then it sat. So
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing it. Sorry, guys.
Typical
So,
kids.
but they'll still see it. I mean, they're 9 and 11, and they'll still sometimes seem like, Dad, can we open it? I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. You'll play with it barely. You don't even fit in it at
Another
this
one.
point, probably. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, it's interesting. I got this in I was primarily focusing on carded and boxed and all that stuff back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it turned out. I think, what collection was it? This one I was buying out full collections at the time. A lot of it was divorcees, at that time.
Oh.
Little different market than now. Most of the time now it's like people are dying. So unfortunately, I would rather have the divorcees. But I got a big collection of like all this miscellaneous dice, and this is one of the things I remember, like games and walkie-talkies, and they just had everything. Whoever the gentleman was. And just and I was telling these guys earlier, James, all of it's underneath my shelving because it's one of those things that I love. I don't have anywhere to display it. It's weird. It's awkward shaped and everything else. So it's literally it's been preserving underneath my shelves. I think I took out some stuff a couple years back for somebody, but there's some stuff that's literally been there for 10 years or more. So
wow.
hopefully it's there just sitting there nice and cozy and staying cool.
Sure.
But, here's a couple other things. I think Phil had this as well. So the collector showcase.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a
Classic.
kind of a fun set. Yeah, I never had that.
I'm
really
very proud of the fact that I still have intact clips.
Oh yeah.
And then this is a kind of a fun piece. So this is original Earl Norham from one of those books.
Wow.
That came out. So I know someone had pretty much the whole book, but they kind of split it up a couple years ago. I helped them, kind of broker it for another collector. And this is one of the pieces I found. Not the best messaging, but it just, total Cobra at that time, as far as what it was. So
Sure.
it's amazing that they're able to get away with that nowadays. That would never, ever, ever happen. So.
To answer your question, David, there was a person out there with a Rancho Obi-Wan style G.I. Joe collection, but she retired.
Oh yeah.
Is that the lady in Texas that had a nervous breakdown?
Oh well. She's on she has a video source on YouTube. And she didn't have a nervous breakdown. She decided to move on with her life. Wanted to focus more on her family.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think that would be something like a Steve Sansweet type of deal. I think you need to get some really extensive collections together and like merge them or whatever to try to find every single thing. But all four of us here, we all have extensive collections, but there are a lot of differences in our collections, merchandising wise.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
I mean,
Oh, that.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I think there's just so much, and you'd have to have like a warehouse like that. I'm constantly having to move stuff because I don't have room, let alone, a whole warehouse like he does. So, I mean, I'm doing my part as far as I can, as far as preserving the figures and the toys, and then the paperwork and the documents and stuff like that, but nowhere near like what he has as far as like all the merchandise that came out. And
Well, he tours. He tours. He does conventions and tours his collection. I've been to several of his exhibits at Star Wars Celebration. And the things
nice.
that he has are, like I said, G.I. Joe has all the same stuff. It's just there's nobody out there that has every single thing like he does.
Well, keep in mind, as big as this collection is, he's got nothing on the Lucasfilm archives. So
Well,
Yeah, that's true.
he got a lot
They're
from
hard to
them.
beat though.
He got a lot from them, actually, Phil.
I think that's like comparing to the Hasbro archives and the warehouse.
well, no, because
No, they threw out
Lucasfilm
a lot
archives
of
actually
things.
archives.
Yeah.
Oh,
they-
all right, well, now that,
there's horror stories about stuff that they toss. Different people will tell you, "Oh, we just dumped it in the trash bin outside." Like what? They
Oh,
painted
sure.
over Hector Garrido artwork. Give me a
Okay.
break.
and Marvel
Well-
threw out a bunch of Larry Hamas books from around the world.
oh yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff I've come across was like some of the hard copies I've come across were like, oh yeah, I pulled them out of the trash. or you hear stories of people dumpster diving, after work hours. You hear those rumors and stories, and you never know. I mean, they used to go because they go through phases, and their flat files will be too full, and they just dump them. They're
Let me
told to dump
say,
them. Some
no
dump them, some
corporation
took
is
'em home.
immune to this. Disney Archive, really renowned about how meticulous they keep track of everything. There's even documentaries about it, right?
Sure.
When it first started, the guy who started getting stuff for the archives, he found the snow globe from Mary Poppins on one of the janitor's desks as a paperweight.
Amazing.
But the
Amazing.
funny thing about that, Disney, the fact that their merchandise and their stuff like that didn't get started till like the mid 70s. And at that point, Disney had existed for 50 years.
Late 60s, actually. The reason Walt's office still exists the way it does is because the guy who was doing the archives knew to keep it that way, to stop anybody moving anything out.
Oh, nice. Cool.
You got any
Crazy.
more cool stuff, Dan?
No, not available.
Ran out.
I only have a few merch, as we like to call it, out and about. Like I said, I need to expand. Need out of my house. To convince my wife to let me do that. So
Well, it's amazing. When you're asking about the boys, like guys that really focused on merchandising, and you talk to them, and they have a list a mile long. Just they seem to have everything, but then they'll sit there and tell you what they don't have, and that list is a mile long. I mean, it's amazing just how much stuff is out.
there is. Well, yeah, I think Dan Moore. Two people come to mind to me: Dan Moore and Paige Wagner.
Oh
When
yeah.
you're talking about merchandise, those two guys to me
Mhm.
have probably one of the most extensive collections.
Rounded home with Roger Taft. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Then
Yeah,
there's-
I didn't.
We're getting to the point now where merchandise is digital. It doesn't actually exist in the real world, but like the G.I. Joe Battleground mobile app game,
Oh yeah.
collecting all those characters and all that artwork.
hmm
I managed to dig into the app and find the source files used in the app before they shut it down.
That's so
I
awesome.
got copies of those saved in my hard drive, but it's nowhere near the high res it should be. But at least you can have a collection of those, or
Sure.
a collection of the commercials that they put out. We're
I know,
still trying to reclaim lost media there.
I know one of our members of our community, I showed his book earlier, Carson, is trying to preserve a lot of the merchandising artwork without any adornments or anything like that. And when we get our next tomb next year, the 10 Commandments, I like to call it, I think a lot of that artwork is going to be in there that we've never seen. And it's going to be very cool to see some of that stuff. But the merchandising as it is right now is not the same as it was back then. People drew things, people painted things. It was a physical, tactile thing. Nowadays, like you said, Phil, it's done on computer, it's digital, it's not the same thing as it was. And I think it loses something a little bit, in my opinion.
I don't know so much that digital artwork is a problem as it is the lack of its abundancy. Like Hasbro will make 2 or 3 static images of a character, and it's that gets reused over and over and over. So you see the same image of Snake Eyes or Baroness or Destro or whatever, and it's the same on those weird Valentines as it was on that sticker sheet. And it's on like the box art for the video game we don't even talk about anymore.
You know what's actually interesting? You're correct about that, because I had an interview with Robert Adkins at ShowFest last year, and he was telling me that they had access because they could not draw all the art for this card game, and so they used artwork that were in the archives from comics, from advertising, from coloring books, from this, from that, everywhere, to incorporate as designs and stuff like that. So they're using that stuff, but it's different than it used to be.
Sure.
Yeah, and you go back to the 80s, and there was a lot of stuff that had unique artwork just for that particular thing. Not all of it was good, but it was unique.
Right.
And now you're just seeing a lot of the same thing over and over. It's not the art that's bad. It's just it's not as unique as it used to be.
I have the Coleco I think it's called the Coleco train set, and it was just too big and too cumbersome to cart out here for this
Tyco.
video. They
Mhm.
also have the trucking set. What was it?
Tyco.
Tyco, sorry, not Coleco. Tyco train set, and they also have the trucking set. I have the train set, but it was just too cumbersome to cart out here for this video. But those are beautiful pieces of artwork, and I saw how Carson showed how they put the endorments on it, and they had to draw the art and paint the art so it would go around that stuff. That was a unique style of advertising that is not. We don't do that anymore, because you can put stuff over stuff, move stuff with a computer, this, that, and the other, and it's not the same.
Well, one thing to factor in with the art, and sure, of course, they're clearly streamlining the process. And once you take paint the image and have it set and scan it in, and you can reuse it and slap it on the shoes, the hats, the car, anything. But something to consider that in a sense, I don't think the customer even necessarily wants new innovative art. Obviously we do, because this is the G.I. Joe fan club, diehard, super fan guys. But everybody, I've said this numerous times in other instances, we could all play a game where if I yelled out 82 Snake Eyes, 85 Flint, as 84, 82 Scarlet, and everybody's going to do the pose, there's a Snake Eyes pose and the Duke and everything. I mean, we have those images, ingrained in our head. There's no two ways around it. So in a sense, the people outside our super fandom world want the same art over and over again anyway. They want that nostalgia fix. I don't think they'd be able to even process Snake Eyes in another pose. Like if he was kicking, let's say,
I think
that would
you're
be
correct.
foreign.
I agree with you 100%, because that grunt
Ninja Force.
pose is like
Yeah.
one of the most used advertising pieces of artwork in the history of advertising, in my opinion. That grunt, and even Adam Riches had to reimagine it for the fan club when he did his. He had to take the original and redo it and stuff. And he added the missing foot, because that piece of art is missing a foot. So I agree with you 100%. That stuff is so familiar.
I don't know if Grunt's foot was ever actually painted, to be honest with you. I don't think, because I have a feeling it was just cut off. I think Hector just did it where it was cut off. So when we did when we did HasCon, I mean, that's just how it was. I'm trying to think if there's because we had to draw the foot. Ended up recruiting my dad to use Dusty's foot, the same pose, and refinishing it to match what Grunt's would have looked like. But I know I'm trying to think of what paintings I've seen where they are cut, like it just was painted off. So
wow,
there's the foot. But yeah,
Not Dorito, but we can make it work.
Yeah, we'll make it work. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see all that stuff, and like what James said, just preserving that old art in our brains. It's always fun to see new stuff, but what's interesting to me is that a lot of the newer stuff is using the 25th anniversary art versus some of the original, right? In many ways, in many cases.
Well, that's probably the only place that exists digitally. So,
True.
Because a lot of that stuff is lost. I know Carson's been getting those. What are those things that he always is talking about? Those
transparency
things that he's searching for. A lot of it's in that, but not everything.
Yeah, and even I don't quite get that. Oh, nice.
But I think, something that's often overlooked is, again, this is stuff that's made up for the case. A lot of these things have like original little comic books on the back to help you ease into the story, and it's all original art manufactured just for this. That only shows up on this. So I think we have kind of lost something with it being so more homogenous. It's easier to produce. I get it. It's a lot faster, but you're missing out on the sheer variety that there used to be.
And I'm not even sure if the dynamicness, like, let's use the Snake Eyes merchandising campaign as an example. You see this poster behind me. I don't know if the dynamicism, I'm not sure if that's a real word, but the dynamicism of the advertising, like it was in, say, the 80s for Real American Hero, is there as as much as they're trying, the team is trying. I don't know if they've captured it. Now, I liked the advertising that they did for this movie, and it is nice, but it has nothing on like the Hector Guido Crimson Guard. Like this is absolutely beautiful, and it's one of the best artworks you can find. But it's one of those things. Maybe it's subjective. Maybe it's my own my own feeling of it, you know. But it's just one of those things.
Well, I think comparing a Snake Eyes movie to G.I. Joe in general is kind of apples and oranges because they're going to want to show off the actors. So you're going to go with live action pictures. There's only so much you can do with that because, you know, people have to be able to physically move in those ways to make the picture.
No.
Well,
You know, kind of lost my thread there.
well, Phil, you'd probably be able to articulate Mr. California, but haven't all those old world movie painters that, you know, there was, I don't remember their name. I'm terrible with artists, but there was a whole
Yeah.
roster. There's 10 or 20 of them out
Basically,
there,
yeah.
and they did everything, and they're just out of
Painted
a
artwork
job.
kind of moved
Well,
out for
that whole
posters. And
thing's
stuff.
lost.
It kind of was gone by the end of the 80s.
Sure.
So you've got Drew Struzan left, and he's long since retired, but you know he'll still post on social media. But he's kind of the
think it
last
goes-
of the great poster painters, and so
Yeah.
it's just
I
the
think that
style
goes
that's
across
evolved
the
over the
board.
last 30 years. Is it's photographs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's across the board. I think, you know, just from what I've learned, you know, anything from, you know, sculpting's all digital now, you know, so, you know, I was talking to a sculptor yesterday and he referred me to somebody and he was just talking about, oh yeah, he'll do some work for you. And like, well, does he do digital, traditional? He goes, he'll do both. He goes, but anytime you give a sculptor a piece of wax, he goes, they'll always enjoy doing the wax more. And, you know, same thing with like the pattern makers for the vehicles for Joe. The fact that those things were done by hand in wood, never will we ever see that again. You know, it's just amazing to think that that's how they were doing it back then.
That's a tradition that happened at some point during the 25th. They went from sculpting prototypes to digitally sculpting, and somewhere around 2011 is when it happened. Because at Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con in like 2008, they showed off some of the original sculpts at the Hasbro booth. But by the Retaliation toy line, you could see some of those vehicle drivers that were the 5 POAs that people hated. They were reuses of digital sculpts that were for canceled Pursuit of Cobra figures. Like the Data Viper turned into that Duke that was with the Nighthawk 2 or whatever.
So you talk about the
Ghost Hawk
sculpts like that Dave had at Joe Con 2010, like all those.
Some of those, yeah. And like, even up to like 2012, you could see some of those prototypes on display. But by that point, the digital sculpts were in play.
Yeah. And
Ghost Hawk 2.
even on the back end, I think the Chinese, not only do they not want to deal with a mailed in hand sculpted object, I think they'll charge you more for the process. Yeah, it's kind of common sense. I can either take a nap and mail in the file. The monkey presses the button and it converts it into tooling, the 3D rendering into tooling, or I can take the time to futz with this sculpt that just came halfway across the world and create the tooling the old way. And they don't want to deal with it. I don't know, but I know,
And their 3D printers are much more advanced than anything that's on the commercial market.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, with all this being said, what do you think was the best ad campaign for merchandising? And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to guess each one of you's answer to this. Which era of G.I. Joe do you feel had the best merchandising ad campaign? Phil.
Well, I'm going to say, early Real American Hero, that 82, the 86 era, just because, again, Earl Norem art. You really can't top it.
James.
I'd have to, obviously, I don't know anything about the 12-inch stuff, being born in 1977 to not live it, but yeah, I'd have to agree with Phil. Of course, even though I'm Mr. Modern, for lack of, self-appointed or whatnot, at the end of the day, you can't beat the nostalgia aspect of Real American Hero, G.I. Joe, the roots. I mean, you could argue that they've pushed it a little harder at certain other areas, but the root product exactly what Phil just showed. That Earl Norm, that painted art, it's really tough to beat. The
Yeah.
originality too.
Dan.
Direct to consumer. You know, I mean, that's no.
Yeah.
Same with these guys. I mean, and again, I think it's our age. You know, because if you ask someone who's a little bit younger, you know, we don't want to age ourselves, but a little bit younger than us, there's plenty of collectors I know who they'd rather have 1990 stuff, and
Sure.
that's their era, and they probably would be more drawn to that stuff because that's what they remember. But yeah, I mean, like I said, my favorite out of all the merchandise I can think of that off the top of my head was that game. Like you could replace the cardboard figures with your actual characters, and that's
Yeah.
smart marketing. I mean, you know, telling the kids like, hey, you know, because now maybe
Mando
you
attack
know,
game.
yeah, I had to go bug my parents like, hey, I need this character for this game. You know, I need the actual character, not this cardboard cut out. You know, but that and the walkie-talkies, I remember as kids, you know, playing with the most. Those are the two things that come to mind, like when I think about my childhood per se.
Well, here's one other quick comment to reinforce that, and not to poo-poo or dismiss the others. That key area, and even into the, let's just say 82, 94 for all intents and purposes, they pushed it like that was in front of your face. Like that, it came to you. It was on the TV. It was in your comic book store. It was even in the movies in 1987. And advertised as such on outside of the half-hour window of G.I. Joe. Anything beyond that, you kind of had to go to it. You had to have this, you know, initial thought that I really like G.I. Joe, which obviously stems from 82, 94, that nostalgic boost. Then you go to the Yojo and the His Tank and the other websites, which, you know, of course, they're daily, probably 100 times a day for us super fans, but, you know, and keep up. And then you would be fed what's going to come out and or out there. But unless I'm missing something, anything past 94, I'd have to like go to the card area of Target to see the G.I. Joe birthday cards, or I'd have to go to the shoe section and happen to stumble upon G.I. Joe shoes and shirts and this, that, and the other.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out that Commando Attack board game we were just talking about had its own TV commercial. There was a Coleco ride-on vehicle, had its own TV commercial. The Power Wheels vehicle had its own TV commercial. The Impel trading cards had their own TV commercial. And
So
that,
maybe that's
they don't even advertise the toys on TV anymore.
Maybe that's an interesting thing that you bring up, Phil, because there's no advertising for G.I. Joe today. There was some for the movie, the Snake Eyes movie, but I think that's the only advertising. We're not getting a cartoon right now. We're not getting advertising for anything. I think when the media coined the phrase kidult, it's the kidults that are keeping this brand alive at the moment, other than people like Jason Morrell that's sharing it with his kids and other members of the community. Dan, I don't know if your kids care about it at all, but I don't see a lot of the kids. I go to Joe Fest, I go to Assembly Required, I go to a lot of shows, and the kids are not really into this stuff. Maybe a little Star Wars, because Star Wars was geared differently. George Lucas had the reins of the advertising and the merchandising. So he has said this in numerous interviews that Star Wars was based on eras of children. He said you could go and follow the periods and see the different children, why they liked certain periods, because that's what was there. Like the original trilogy, then the expanded trilogy, then Clone Wars, then Rebels, then now the new stuff. You could see that G.I. Joe to a certain extent has that with us, the 60s 12-inch guys, the Real American Hero guys, the 90s guys. Jason Packard's a big 90s guy, and there are other people like him out there, the 90s guy. And then there's the Sigma 6 guys. Now we have the classic guys. So to a certain extent, there is the same thing, but it's not based on media. It's based on the toys, wherein Star Wars is based on media.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, you had Spy Troops movie and stuff. So, I mean, that's a generation that out for a while on that stuff. I mean, when I decided to sell some of that, and I was like, well, is it too early? Is it right timing? You'll never know. But I mean, I'm curious to see. I mean, those kids that were playing with that stuff in the early 2000s, I mean, they're still either teenage, you know, 17, 18 maybe,
They're 30.
or
Yeah,
The
we're,
kids playing the.
it's that long ago. We're that old.
No, well, no, I'm
Well,
thinking like 2000,
But the
2003
thing about that,
probably.
Dan, is there were a lot of kids in the 80s that lost their Joes, that got into girls, got into college, blah, blah, blah. And then they came back, and that was there. Retaliation, Joe versus
But
Cobra,
I'm saying
25th,
kids.
Sigma 6, that was there. And they reignited. Chris McLeod is an example of that. I reignited because I lost my original 80s collection as well. So some of us were from the 80s that were in our 20s getting that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Well, you
but
can
I'm
be
saying
older.
the kids that played with that stuff from the early 2000s. I mean, they're only in their 20s at this point, so it'll
Well,
be
let's-
interesting to see
Yeah, they'd be
down
28.
the road.
If they're 8 years old in 2020 or 2003, they're 28.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking when they're born. So yeah, I guess yeah. So I
Oh,
mean, they're
sure.
mid 20s.
As I stare in the void of all these modern books and I start to do the math in reverse and think, yep, I'm that old. And it's that long.
But yeah, to your
Trust-
point. I mean, when those
trust
kids
me.
were playing with them, I guess yeah,
I'm
they'd
not
be
trying
that
to
age.
be
So,
down
but I
down
mean-
segment.
I would like to point
The-
out the last time there were toy commercials on the TV for G.I. Joe was 2009.
Okay, yeah.
That's 14 years ago now.
Was it Pursuit of Cobra? Or did they get that?
Rise of
first?
Cobra.
Rise of Cobra. Okay, yeah.
Pursuit of Cobra didn't have any commercials.
Okay.
Before that, you have to go back to Sigma 6 for the last TV commercials. And then, but yeah, the New Sculpt era, the second generation figures, they had a regular allotment of commercials for about 3 years straight, along with the Spy Troops movie and the Valor vs. Venom movie. So they
Okay.
had more media exposing them to those toys, along with reruns of the Sunbow cartoon on Cartoon Network really regularly. But again, they actually had toy commercials. This last 14 years, there have not been any toy commercials.
Yeah.
You know, were there a couple commercials on the hub for G.I. Joe Renegades?
The cartoon, yes. The toys, no.
Okay. I never watched it on the hub. I watched it online. Again, going to the source of it all.
Well, the hub put their commercials online, so you can find them too.
Oh, there you go. The only other reason why I have any sort of insight on the newer stuff, because I tend to sell newer stuff at the shows, and it is kind of funny. Here comes this young 20-something guy, and you're thinking, oh, he's gonna ask for Power Rangers or Pokemon or something. He starts futzing through my Joe versus Cobra. I'm like, really? Somebody wants to touch this? And chat him up, and sure enough, like, oh yeah, I had these. They're in my sandbox. I just want same story we had it.
Yeah. I mean,
when we
my
first met in the '90s. All of us.
My nephew's 18, and he's giving my son all his 25th anniversary Joe stuff, and stuff that I was buying him when he was a kid. To your point earlier, I was thinking when people were born, but yeah, when you're actually playing with toys. But it's kind of crazy. And I mean, I don't know if he'll come back to it. That's what I'm kind of curious is. I already think I know the answer, but I'm curious. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. That maybe that generation will come around like, hey, I want some of those old toys that I had. Or are they just busy collecting apps that they had when they were younger? Who knows?
Well, that's certainly the X factor. Well,
Yeah.
like we can look at some funky things from the 40s, 50s, 60s that we want as our age, and they probably back then they'd be like, yeah, this will be junk in 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what will happen? Well, I was gonna say, if you recall, where was it? I think it was 25th anniversary. Remember the ones that came with the CDs?
Oh,
I have a
yeah.
few of those.
They had a cartoon episodes on those. Those were fun.
Those
You know?
Spy Troops, man.
Yeah, so I remember opening all those because like, oh yeah, I need to get this and watch these, and then all of a sudden they came out the box set, and then now they're all digital and streamlined. They're streamed online anyway. So, but yeah, those are fun little sets too.
Oh, of
You gotta
course.
love variants. Gotta love all the variants, of course, to get them all. But
Oh yeah, I think there were 6 each, 6 a wave.
Uh,
Well, 3
yeah.
discs, 6 figures, on and on and on.
yeah, and being a
And a
completist,
cool canceled wave.
I went
that's
from
right,
all.
yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, they were the best ones, arguably. I can say this: I helped open up a toy store a few years back in Ohio, and I'd work it a little bit, and hands down, half the kids that walked in couldn't wait to get out of the toy store to go play video games. That was a given. They did not want to be there. Dad drug them there. Boo hoo, And then of the half that did want to stay and be in there, it was hands down the little girls were more interested in in the and running around and playing with all the GI Joes and Transformers and this that and the other, as opposed to the little boys.
That is
The little
interesting.
boys hands down won in video games.
Interesting, very interesting. But that's why they just put like, what was it, $4 million or whatever, or $400 million into Wizards of the Coast to develop the GI Joe game that they're making right now. And that's where they feel their money is more valued at for that audience.
They put 400 million.
I believe it's a 4 and it's million. I don't know if it's
Maybe
400 million
4
or 40
million.
million or 4 million or something. It's 4 and million somewhere.
Okay.
And so that is what they're pushing towards the kids, today's video games. But you know, I know adults that want a really high-end shooter GI Joe game, but that's not my thing. I have to have something tactile that I can hold, I can see, I can look at, and I can involve myself with, you know. That's just how I grew up. But I guess this new era of children, they're used to using their thumbs. I think we're going to end up with 2 thumbs now. Genetically, the kids are going to have 2 thumbs because, you know, those video games.
I mean, my kid plays Fortnite and all that, and that's what he likes. You know, I mean, I mean, when he's younger, he's into toys and all that, but I mean, he never really got into the figures. But he always liked the vehicles, and my daughter liked the figures. So, you know, but even now, like Classified, you know, they had a few during COVID, you know, we opened and played with, and they took on trips and stuff like that. But, you know, they got some for Christmas, and my daughter was looking yesterday. She was asking about the new ones that came out that I got recently, and she's looking at them. And, you know, I mean, at the time I was buying doubles just because I thought they were going to be into them and buy them to open them. And then I, of course, just got stuck buying doubles or something. So, you know, why not?
Honestly, if GI Joe is to survive as a hobby, we need to get more girls into it. You know, Transformers is so much greater a market share. They have a gigantic female base. It's not really something you think of off the top of your head, but it's there.
There are GI Joe female fans. I've run across them over the years, and I actually stepped on the toes of one time, and Diana Davis had to correct me on this. She said in the 80s there was a GI Joe female contingent of fans, and I did not know that. She was explaining it to me, and I was like, wow, I did not know that, because there was no girls that wanted to play GI Joe with me, that's for sure.
Well, you don't become a number 1 comic book just by appealing to boys.
Yeah, I mean, my sisters, I mean, they'd be playing Barbies, and my Joes would be the kids. I mean, they wouldn't necessarily play with them, but they would allow me to be in their world, I guess. And I think a lot of sisters, you know, my younger sister wanted a GI Joe when she was a kid. So I think it just depends on, you know, whether they have brothers or not, and sometimes back then that is, and whether they got into it. So
Sure. One of the first 12-inch shows was run by a woman down in Texas, if I understand it correctly.
Bill, the septic tank was designed by a woman.
Wow.
Did you know that? Did you know that?
I did not
I
know
did
that.
not.
So
You're
I'm
the
hoping to
expert on the
feature.
septic tank, right, Phil? Why didn't you know that?
Uh-oh.
Well, I don't have a
Yeah,
lot of the
Phil.
design drawings. I'm still trying to track down that stuff.
Phil, we're
Yeah.
going to expect you to know everything. And tell
I'm
us all
hoping
about
I'm hoping to feature it in the near future, Phil, for you in the book. So we'll see. We'll see if I can get the clean designs. I have just some photos off their phone, but we'll see. But
Oh, is that
gentlemen,
gonna
I need
be
to
in,
run here.
volume 11 or 12, because I love the septic
11, 12,
tank. It's
or
one of my most favorite vehicles because it's such a play on words, and the whole concept is just incredible.
Yeah, 12, 11, 12, or 13. One of the
13
we're-
now.
who knows? That's what's up in the air right now. I'm working on all 3 at once.
You are?
So
Excellent.
I'll know. The goal is to finish all the pages for the most part, and then just put the books together and spread them out. So we'll figure it out. I'll figure it out when I get there. How's that?
I like
Uh,
it.
James,
I do need to
go ahead.
run here in a moment. I'm gonna have to run here in a moment.
Dan, if
so-
you got to get going, yeah.
Yeah, that's
we'll
fine.
Save
I
the,
was-
we'll save the NFT conversation for part 2.
There you go.
Sorry, I didn't mean
All right.
to get choke you up there.
No, that's fine. I was going to let you go anyways, Dan. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we will see you in the future.
Thanks, guys. Good seeing everybody.
Take it easy, bud. Yeah, take
All
care.
right, man.
And then there were three.
So James, I had a question. Do you have any ideas for the GI Joe fan club that maybe is covering any kind of merchandise discussion articles or anything coming up in the future?
Well, fans should have issue 1, and they would have had by now, and they would have had they would have read the article by David Arenas, who covered the Panini the stickers that Philip showed in the binder earlier. They did a whole huge battleship thing, and they can go reference the newsletter for the specifics. But it apparently came with a nice original painted board, and they would lay out the little sticker pieces and play a game with it. And that was apparently real popular with them. It came in snacks. So of course kids love their sweeties and get a treat, and then get a little GI Joe sticker, and they play the game all roll into one.
Cool.
As far as, but yeah, if anybody, maybe issue 2 will come out, spoiler, by now, but there'll be the role playing game that you had mentioned earlier. We also have an article on that coming up.
Phil, do you guys have any cool episodes on any GI Joe related products in the future?
Nothing planned at the moment, but you never know what the future is going to hold.
Sure. Well, you guys have covered amazing stuff. You and Pat. Shout out to Pat.
Yeah,
I love
Patrick's
that. I watch every episode. The only one I think it was late watch. It was the one where it was the battle of the knowledge between the two of you. That one I had to watch late because I was stuck in the holidays working on my job and stuff, so I didn't have hardly any time to do anything. But that one I caught late. But that was a funny episode too.
Yeah, I lost that. Spoiler alert.
Uh-oh.
I don't want to say that, Phil. I'm glad you said it because I didn't want to throw you under the bus like that. But it was still fun. It was still fun. The knowledge that you guys have about stuff, I could never have gotten 90% of those questions answered either way, one or the other. You guys have more knowledge than me combined, probably. In one
It's starting to leak out the ears, so that's the problem.
Oh, now that's true.
Well, I just had a birthday yesterday, so I'm getting up there. My brain is getting a little slushed. I don't know,
Well,
too much
I
info.
was going to say, don't give Phil too much grief. He had a tough challenger. Pat's even had guys travel across the country to challenge him in a trivia contest. So
They have?
yes. Ask
they're gonna
Pat about
lose.
that one at your next Joe Fest convention or convention.
So, with everything that we've covered in this episode, the merchandising of the brand and stuff like that, do you feel that the brand is at a strong point right now, or do you feel that it has to do something different for the future audience when it comes to branding and merchandising? Phil.
Well, G.I. Joe is one of those properties that kind of ebbs and flows. So it really does. I mean, even going back to the 60s, you can see popularity dip, which is where they had to, pivot to an adventurer. And so it's always kind of been an issue with being a military sort of based property. So, political environment, patriotic fervor, what's going on in the world, that always kind of affects G.I. Joe more so than, say, Star Wars or Transformers, where they have the sci-fi veneer to keep them sort of isolated from reality. So it's actually G.I. Joe is in a better place than it's been in previous, probably 10 years. But I don't know if the merchandise is necessarily going to ever really affect it in that way, as it is just brand recognition. But brand recognition for G.I. Joe is still pretty high. It's just getting people to care about it.
James.
Sure. I can agree with all that. No problem. And you can see the battle that Hasbro's been having with that whole, exactly what Phil said, that sci-fi element versus the real world military, where Wave 1 classified clearly came out with fake Nerf-like weapons, and I was hoping that they would have merged that a little more just for the novelty of it. But the figures, obviously, Duke had a tan shirt, and Scarlet had some orangish tans and blues, and Roadblock looked like his version 2, and Snake Eyes, well, you can't do anything. The fans will grab the pitchforks or their scimitars if Snake Eyes isn't in black. And Destro was, surprisingly 1982 with that, chest of flaring, but they still tried to incorporate the future tech into it to try and distance itself from the real world, which then it gives them a lot more flexibility. It keeps the moms at bay, which can always have to reiterate to that. So what? The moms don't buy GI Joe anymore? No, they don't just quit buying GI Joe. They quit buying Potato Head, Power Rangers, Star Wars, Marvel, if and when they stick their hooks into something, and rightfully so. I don't think any toy line needs to be too graphic or I don't want to say military-esque, but adult. Let kids be kids is a huge thing to me, but even more so, again, the underlying theme that we all touched on is just this dynamic, this shift where it is adult. I mean, we still go to the toy hall. Are there ever really kids there? No. I met way more adult collectors recently in the toy hall than I have at new people at Joe than the other Joe shows. Mostly because I know everybody at the Joe shows. But
depends on the retailer. If you go to Walmart, there's still plenty of Rugrats running around tearing the place up. And now with the new Toys R Us's, there's still children in those that are still running around. Yes, I agree. The kid out is the primary audience for this, but you're right.
Well, yeah, okay. And if they're in I'm thinking of Target off the top of my head, and my Target has essentially 2 aisles. It's got the older toy aisle with, the G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers, Marvel's all ages, but they're still pulling these deep cuts from the comics from like Phil just said earlier, the Claremont area and everything. But then on the other side is the Fortnite and stuff that's I have no interest in. Let's put it that way, which means younger. And I literally don't see the kids because we stay in our lane.
But they did do
Don't make
the
eye
Fortnite
contact.
Snake Eyes though.
Well, sure, but did it sell on the shelves? I mean, and I think they did it, and then they kind of backed off on it essentially because once it came out, nobody cared and pushed. I think it's neat. I mean, don't get me wrong on that. I own one. I like the colorful dynamics. I think that's fun, but I don't think anybody really was like chomping at the bit waiting for their Fortnite Snake Eyes to come in. You could say that there was just, by the time Fortnite Snake Eyes came out, there was so much more to look forward to that it got dwarfed. But I think it was more of just a fun thing to cross over and cross brand more than it was anything long lasting and gave the G.I. Joe Classified, i.e. the brand, a step forward.
I want to touch on 2 points that you said in that real quick.
Sure.
The fact that they did that crossover was saying something. The Hasbro had a broader view that there's other things out here that we can merchandise towards. Now they're doing the Transformer crossovers. We're going to get a third one here probably this year with the Thunder Machine. And I think that's interesting that they're doing these crossovers. Is that a future a line for them that they're going to continue to do and maybe broaden into other popular brands? And then the second thing, I really think the kids nowadays are definitely a lot more mature than I was when I was young. And I thought I was mature when I was young because I had a job when I was 13 years old, and I had spending money, and I was buying the things I wanted. Mom and dad wasn't. necessarily buying it unless it was my birthday or Christmas, but I was buying my comics. I was buying G.I. Joe and toys and stuff myself. And I worked for that. So I thought I was mature. But the kids today, with the computer savvy kids and the intellectual stuff where they're on the computers and the role playing games, a lot of these kids are into role playing games like in their 6 and 7 and 8 year old range. I didn't get into role playing till I was 12, 13, 14.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the comic shops aren't comic shops anymore. They're gaming stores that have a little comic section stuffed for us skeezballs to just slide in, do our thing, and get out so they can game. You're absolutely right on that. And then when you go into the gaming room, it's guys our age playing against 12 years old. Yeah, 8 and 12 year olds, and those kids can apparently hang. I don't play. Well, you can see 2 points. You can see that, and then even in the commercials, to bring it back to Star Wars, it's not just the little kids. Remember, we always envied those little kids playing with the figures in the sand or the ice, given the theme of the figure. And yeah, I want to play with that toy, but now it's adults playing it with them. They're not even hiding it anymore. I mean, SNL did that spoof, I think, with episode 7, where the kids and the adults were pushing away the kids to play with the new Star Wars toys.
True.
Yeah, 2015.
Yeah, 2015. But but it's not. Now it's, again, the overall theme that we touch on. This is literally adults more. I don't want to say more, but it's getting a lot closer to 50-50 than it's ever been. I always say action figures is the modern iteration of the adult or the guy down the street that had the train set, or maybe your dad had the train set. My dad didn't have the train set, but I did have a neighbor that had a phenomenal train set, and I guarantee you in 2023, if the kids would come over, I'd be the guy with a phenomenal action figures collection.
Or is it
that
maybe
they can't touch?
Or is it maybe the coin collector or stamp collector guys out there?
That too, I think. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's going down a hair. You made 2 points, and I was gonna ask Phil I was gonna make a point, but then what was your 2 points? I apologize, but I thought Phil was better.
Well, it's the role-playing thing that I was concerned, because obviously Hasbro was putting a bunch of money into the role-playing, the video game, the Wizards of the Coast, and Pokemon and Magic and stuff. They're making billions of dollars. Those parts, if you look at the budgeting for Hasbro and their losses and profits for this year, Magics of the Coast was profitable. It's been profitable for the last 25 years straight. It's never lost.
But they're also pushing that again, that's coming to them. Like, that's pushing them in all avenues. They're not pushing G.I. Joe in those avenues.
I would like to point out the role-playing game is being done by a third party, so Hasbro is just getting money for it.
Renegade Game Studios, of course, and they're doing a fantastic job. I have all that merchandise. They're obviously advertising this merchandise to us kidults, and we're buying it because I know a lot of people did. And I played a game at Assembly Required with a couple of kids and then 3 adults. It was 3 adults versus a couple of kids. So it was exactly what you said, James, about that.
And probably always will be. From here on out, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think any of those games, because we've had trading card games before in 2003, 4, 5, and
you showed the
Battlegrounds game. I was a junkie on that myself, but I don't think. That kind of touched the gaming community, but I don't think. Nice, yeah.
Yeah, I want those cards. I can't find them anywhere.
I don't think they ever really. Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it had one expansion, and that's usually a sign of a failed trading card game, because there's always one expansion in the pipeline.
They
launch.
Sure.
But I don't think the market was quite there yet, because it was still very much just Pokemon and Magic the Gathering and maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! And those are still the big 3.
There was other ones. Star Wars had a really nice game. Star Trek had a good card game. They had about 10 expansions. With Star Wars went for 20 expansions or something. That thing went forever. So
yeah, they had really good games, but those were in the 90s. By the time the 2000s rolled around, those were gone.
Okay. But
everybody tried a trading card game in the 90s. There was a Tomb Raider game.
Sure. Of course there was. But those properties you mentioned are also just behemoths, and
Yeah.
and I always at least Star Wars I try to eject out of the conversation because Star Wars I call it a lifestyle. It's not even you can't sit there and discuss it in the same realm of action figures. Obviously they have action figures, but there's such a
You're,
root system. I can't you know what I mean my screen
right.
isn't big enough
You're right. It's a
to
family
say
affair.
why
Every
they
time,
collect action figures.
yeah, every time you see it's a Star Wars family. The mother and father is dressed in the costume.
Yeah.
The children are dressed in the costume. Yeah, that's a family affair. It's a lifestyle, just like you said, and it's across the planet. It's not just the United States. That was one of the advertising
Nice.
issues with G.I. Joe in the 70s and to a certain extent in the 80s. And Kurt Busiek has talked about this, where because of the military aspect of it, it was tricky to advertise G.I. Joe. That's why they had to go to lasers and stuff like that and make it just in the future, like I was saying in the very beginning of this discussion.
Sure. I mean, that's always, and for better or worse, I don't think that's ever going to dissipate. I don't think it's ever going to go back to a human on human battle. There's always going to be, Cobra's always going to be throwing the bats at them, or they're going to be throwing out the mutants or toxo zombies or anything else, the non-humans
Right.
to,
Plausible deniability villains.
there you go. Absolutely. I didn't even know this, but the whole zombie phenomenon I think it's now dwindling, but that was literally so you can't kill stuff that's dead. So kill away.
I love those G.I. Joe zombies that
Yeah, me
were
too.
in the retaliation line. What was it? The Resolute or retaliation line? I love those zombies. I have a ton of those zombies. I think that's one of the most brilliant things that Hasbro ever came up with were those zombies. And then they re-released them as a 2-pack during the 50th anniversary. And I'm like, come on, why can't we get more of this type of stuff? Bats, zombies, like monsters. In the 90s, they had this huge ad campaign for all these cool monsters, futuristic sci-fi stuff in space, and it went nowhere. Patrick Stewart and his partner did a whole thing on all the unproduced stuff in the 90s. And I'm like, that's what I want. That's what I want to see. Fantasy, sci-fi.
Well, I think we're in the stark minority on that. I mean, everybody wants, and not everybody, but I think it's safe to say there's a large slice of the pie that their biggest debate is, do you cut it off at 87 or do you cut it off at 89? Or 85,
Once the dominant color stops being green, there's a whole contingent of the fandom who just tunes out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's probably never going to change. And I think that permeates outside into that casual fan that buys just 1 or 2 or 3 figures and calls it done. Those guys are people like the general consumers, pulling a lot more weight than we'd care to admit.
Yeah, there are definitely these strong military contingent of guys that want realistic army building type stuff. That's why they go to Gridiron Studios and all these companies to get that loadout for their figures to do that real campaigns of military battles when they do their dioramas and act out that stuff. They want that realistic stuff, and that's a viable audience, obviously. And I'm not taking anything away from that. But when I got into G.I. Joe, it was the fantasy of it, that was the escapism of it. The merchandising and the ad campaign showed the fantasy and the action oriented stuff forefront. It wasn't, hey, fight Joe with Joe. Maybe in the 60s they did that, but not in the 80s, not my era.
Well, in the 60s, G.I. Joe was just fighting. There wasn't even really an enemy to.
There was no bad guy. Right?
He was just charging you.
He was marching.
You had the Nazi soldier from the Soldiers of the World line. That was it.
Yeah. All right.
The Japanese
soldier. Well, actually, and I've talked to them about this real quick. That they say, why would you want another enemy? Like the enemy is anything you want. Make up your own. Like if you talk to our 12-inch buddies, they're like, well, Cobra's great. They dig it. Of course, you can't help. It's clearly interesting, but at the end of the day, they're like, make your own enemy. What the hell?
Well, I made a whole thing about how many enemies G.I. Joe actually has.
Oh wow, nice.
Cool.
That's
Send me
freaking
a
wild.
copy.
Did you have that printed out? I mean, did you have that?
Yeah,
out?
this was a submission I made for one of the Joe cons.
Oh,
I just happened
nice.
to come across it when I was pulling out stuff for today.
Freaking awesome.
So, do you think the brand as a whole, GI Joe, has a positive future ahead of itself, or do you think they definitely have to look internally at themselves in the mirror and say, what do we want this to be, or is there some other thought process do you think about Phil?
Barring a total brand reinvention, I think we're going to just keep seeing boom and bust cycles with this sort of iteration of GI Joe. I mean, you can only go patriotic military versus terrorists so long before that goes out of fashion and comes back in again. There's too many outside factors that affects it for it to be its sort of own thing and be independent of all that.
James.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's very succinct. The whole boomer bust comment Phil made. Large toy companies. This kind of blew my mind. Maybe I'm off. And I understand the corporate world and that you need to push your product and you need to push your branding and your core characters and all that. So that's great that Hasbro has that. But what it does, to pile on what Phil was saying, it does paint them in a corner where it's very hard for them to get out. Like, so yes, G.I. Joe probably, I think the easiest way for G.I. Joe to really continue on for another 100 years, let's throw out a wild number, is what Phil says, it needs to reinvent itself and move forward, chunk it out, chunk it out, chunk it out. The way it went from 12-inch to Real American Hero, it tried in Sergeant Savage and Extreme.
And Super Joe.
And Super Joe, yeah, okay, absolutely. Sigma 6, see, there you go. They didn't chunk it out. It's just a different form of Snake Eyes Duke, Road, or not Heavy Duty and Cobra Commander, but they're still very, you can visualize, you can see the core characters in that. And I don't know how to spec that out beyond just me saying it. That, and of course, I obviously love those core characters. I don't personally ever want to get rid of them, but here I am with you guys on a G.I. Joe fan club special video. I'm going to be a little biased. But I mean, if you really want to look at the simple truth of the matter, it's going to be pretty difficult for people younger than our our youth being in the 82 to 94 era. Put yourself wherever you may fit, but I guarantee everybody that's watching this is fit. It has their youth and the footing in that at some point, and the kids, I definitely think it greatly diminished past 94. A quick caveat, if in this relevant, Brian Savage, the runner of the G.I. Joe Collectors Club, was very excited, just waiting. He was convinced that the Hall of Fame came out in 91. Is that correct? The 12-inch.
That's the Target exclusive Duke was 91.
Okay. So and that of course had a few years, and he was convinced that the kids that played with that were going to eventually fall in line, follow the trend as we did with Real American Hero, and obviously him and his group, that's why he started the Collectors Club, did with 12-inch, is that the kids would come around and he was setting his watch, any day now, 2008, 2009, 2010, like we just did the math earlier with Dan, and he was really expecting them to come and they didn't. And that's the first sign that G.I. Joe's really not gonna, and not just in a 12-inch sense, but in this spiral derivative sense, that G.I. Joe's not, the 97-8 collectors, they're not gonna come. The Joe versus Cobra kids, well, Joel's one of them, the guy that is helping me out at shows with the fan club. He's 10 years younger than me, or 12 years younger than me, so he's one of those Joe versus Cobra guys, but they're very few and far between. And anybody else is just us buying the same stuff again. And it's just Malibu Stacy with a new hat.
There's definitely a new audience. There's definitely a new audience for Classified, because I tune into a lot of different podcasts and things like that. There's definitely a new audience, but they're not kids. They're adults that are like Star Wars or Marvel Legends fans that are getting into the high detailed sculpting and realistic figures that the G.I. Joe brand are putting out there. That's a different audience. I don't know if you can advertise to that audience, because they're a specific niche group of the audience.
They're 6-inch guys.
Yeah, the 6
If you put 6-inch anything out, you could put out 6-inch. I can't even. I like all the funky brands. I was gonna make a funny one, but I dropped the ball. Whatever, 6-inch anything, they're gonna buy it, and they'll be like, hell yeah, I'm gonna buy it. That's sight unseen, but that's that. I don't think that counterpoints what I'm saying, because that's still our same age group. Per that logic, let's say they put out 10-inch GI Joes. Are the 70-year-olds that never played with GI Joes, are they going to buy it? That's not going to sustain a brand when we're all 70, 30 years from 20, 30 years from now. What are the kids? What are the new generation going to do?
So
I also don't see the reaction figures selling out, so that's not a great sign.
Oh, well, yeah, there you go.
Every target has at least 1 or 2 peg hooks filled. It's never the same people. It's like 7 or 8 or 10 different characters, but there's always 2 full peg hooks almost at every target you go to with reaction figures. I don't buy mine at Target. I buy mine at through the website, but you have to obviously go to Target to get the rare ones like the Red Ninja, the weird Brazil Snake Eyes, the Black Storm Shadow, whatever you want to call. All those you have to go to Target to get those. But other than that, it's all the regular ones. You don't see kids buying those because, like we said earlier, there aren't kids in the aisles at Target. There aren't. Maybe Walmart, Toys R Us. There are, but not Target. There are adults in the aisles at Target. And that's a problem. Target is having issues like that. But I think G.I. Joe as a brand, in order to sustain itself in the future, has to bring in new characters, new ideas. Yeah, incorporate Snake Eyes, incorporate Cobra, incorporate Duke. Like you said with Sigma 6, there was different ideas. In Sigma 6, there was different ideas in Valor vs. Venom, Joe vs. Cobra. There was different ideas in Sergeant Savage, G.I. Joe Extreme. They've added more as they've gone along. And if you can't add more and show more imagination and thought with this stuff, it is going to die. They have announced this new thing called the mall rats or the mole rats or whatever the heck that is. And they're using like Shadow Tracker is getting a figure next year who was only 10 years old, Shadow Tracker. So, they did Kamakura, that's 20 years old. So I think Hasbro is getting that, and they're going to do just like I'm saying. I hope that's what they're going to do. But I believe that's the future. If they can't incorporate new stuff and incorporate stuff from these other generations to broaden this audience base, it's going to die. And it's going to be, like Phil said, it's just going to go down again. They're going to have to reinvent it. It'll come back for whatever amount of time. Then it'll go down again. And that's what the history of this brand seems to be.
Well, that's just, and now we're getting, and I don't want to get, this is philosophical too much, but I mean, because especially since, well, on the premise that this is a merchandise video, but I mean, do we approach it as we are the stewards of the brand, and therefore we buy we support the brand sight unseen, and we help transition the brand into the younger generation. So maybe you buy these kooky. I always say we're all saying G.I. Joe just needs to get weird and get out there. I always use the loose example where G.I. Joe is no longer a military; it's a circus of sorts, and they go and they solve mysteries, and you can do that. You can make Snake Eyes an acrobat, and you can make Duke a ringleader, and first, whatever. So yes, that's just a spitball that it needs to get weird. But then on the other side, but the immediate philosophical counterpoint is, well, I just want to collect what I love, and what I love is 82 to 87, and that's it, and that's not necessarily perpetuating the brand. That's locking in a moment in time, and both of those are acceptable. Obviously, do what you want, by any means, but sure. I mean, I think round it back home to what Phil's initial point was. The answer is always wait and see. Right? I don't think I'm putting words in your mouth on that one.
We are in the 60th anniversary of this brand, so obviously along the way they've done some positive things, they've done some good things, or a brand wouldn't have sustained itself for 60 years. So I congratulate Hasbro. I love G.I. Joe. I will support it as much as possible. And I look forward to this year to see what comes out, not just for action figures and toys, but for other merchandise. You see all the cool stuff that I've showed. A lot of this stuff is within the last couple of years that I've shown. So I'm looking forward to seeing what new merchandising that they come up with, and if we're going to get some sort of media tie-in. I really do look forward to that possible Chuckles movie or Lady J TV series, or that Snake Eyes Storm Shower cartoon that was going to be done by Brazil people, and all those things I was looking forward to, and I'm hoping we get some of that stuff. The video games are great. I'm not a big gamer, but I'll buy it and I'll just stick it on the shelf. I didn't go and get my Operation Blackout game. I should have got that to show during this merchandising thing. Is right over there. But so I did support it, but it's going to be an interesting year. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
I think the good news is that Hasbro, the higher ups, they're willing to let the people on the brand do it. They're giving them the room and the bandwidth to do some stuff that they wouldn't do in previous iterations. Again, exactly like what Phil said, the ebbs and the flows, the spikes. And on the other side, I think this brand team really wants to push it out as far as they're allowed to go. And not to say that any other brand didn't. I'm safe to assume that they always wanted, every iteration wanted to, but this, I definitely feel when I watch them on video, and I'm not saying this because I'm running a G.I. Joe fan, toting the line, but yeah, I think that both cylinders, both main cylinders on that end are firing, and now it's just, what does the consumer do? What do we do? You guys watch it. We buy it or not.
Right. You have anything last words to say, Phil?
Oh, I think I've said everything I can.
So,
Okay. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me today. I also want to thank Dan Klingensmith. I also would like to reiterate that I love G.I. Joe. I wish it the best in the future. I want to also thank Brian Sauer, who's doing the special effects and
absolutely.
digital and computer stuff for us. He's a genius, and I look forward to seeing what he comes up with every episode. So Brian Sauer, thank you very much for your support. I want to thank the fans for watching us on these episodes. If you have any comments, ideas that you would like us to cover in the future, comment below. And we will see you next time on the G.I. Joe Fan Club Live.
Well, real quick, Phil, did you want to plug anything or?
Oh, just check out our channel, Articulated Points, with myself and Napicard Patrick Stewart, and
Awesome.
we talk about G.I. Joe there. We talk about a lot of toy lines there, so check us out.
Always a treat. I love it. Thanks, guys.
All right.